I'm Walter Hang. I'm the president of Toxics Targeting. I've done a lot of work on Marcellus Shale horizontal hydrofracking in New York, and I'm just letting you know that my company is going to be releasing a great deal of documents related to problems that were identified with horizontal hydrofracking in Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania. More than a year ago, an Environmental Protection Agency scientist contacted me to find out if I had data for Pennsylvania comparable to the data that I compiled in New York, which documented fires, explosions, polluted water supply wells, homes that had been impacted by natural gas, and massive wastewater discharges that were never properly cleaned up. The scientist was named Amy Birkdale. She was talking a mile a minute. She was talking about drinking water contamination. It took me 7 months to figure out what was going on. So I then began to compile information about an unprecedented drinking water crisis that occurred along the Monongahela River in the autumn of 2008. Essentially what happened was that when the de facto moratorium on Marcellus Shale horizontal hydrofracking was adopted in New York, many firms simply went to Pennsylvania to try to extract Marcellus Shale gas in that portion of the formation. The problem with this entire process is that you generate massive amounts of contaminated wastewater. It has very high levels of what's called total dissolved solids, TDS. This primarily involves chlorides. Number 2, the wastewater is toxic. And number 3, it essentially is radioactive. If you discharge this contaminated wastewater into a municipal treatment plant designed to handle human waste, you get passed through, and you can also wind up with contaminated sludge. So essentially, wastewater treatment plants, particularly in western Pennsylvania, accepted so much gas drilling wastewater, up to 40% of their influent, that they essentially polluted the Monongahela River to the point where drinking water could not be provided from that river. So in the autumn of 2008, 850,000 people couldn't drink water that was normally supplied from the Monongahela River. The authorities tried to increase discharges from reservoirs and impoundments. They tried to limit the amount of gas drilling wastewater that could be accepted by treatment plants, only 1%. And essentially, the only thing that allowed the water to become potable again was that it started raining in December, and that ultimately increased the flow in the Monongahela. This information was very, very detailed. They conducted investigations of tributaries down gradient of discharges that showed salt-loving diatoms were flourishing in the altered conditions in water quality. But this information never got conveyed to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation as part of its effort to adopt the draft supplemental generic environmental impact statement. There's not one word about these problems in that massive 700-page document. Of making this information available so that the draft SGEIS can be expanded to address these concerns. It isn't just TDS. The authorities actually now believe that the high levels of radioactivity might actually affect worker health. So a lot of information is going to come to light, and it's going to come to light in, I believe, a landmark history-making series in the New York Times. So when that becomes available, I'll alert you, I'll post documents, and then after all of this gets underway, I urge you, do all you can to make sure you sign the coalition letter asking Governor Cuomo to expand the scope of the draft SGEIS. Get everyone you can to sign that letter. We're at 2,500 signatories now. We really need to crank that up. And then I implore you, call, email Governor Cuomo. Expand the draft. That's the message. The coalition letter also says set up a citizens advisory committee, a technical advisory committee, make sure that there is a minimum of 30 days public comment on how DEC can expand the draft, identify all the issues that have recently come to light after the proceeding began 2.5 years ago, require individual EISs for horizontal hydrofracking permit applications. This is what the DEC proposed for the New York City and Syracuse watersheds. It ought to be expanded for the entire formation. And then we also want to make sure that GA effluent limitations are imposed on all horizontal hydrofracking activities to make sure that we don't have contamination of groundwater, that we don't allow this contamination to go to wastewater treatment plants that can't handle the waste. And then finally, we want to upgrade all of the regulations for natural gas drilling so that when and if horizontal hydrofracking is allowed in New York State, it will be done in a way that can protect the public health and the environment. So there is not one horizontal hydrofrac Marcellus shale well in New York State because of the de facto moratorium. And I believe that until we have adequate regulations, we simply can't allow that to happen. There's plenty of gas available on the market. There's a giant glut. So Andrew Cuomo has an opportunity for the first time to avoid these kinds of problems that have engulfed Pennsylvania. And that's essentially what we are asking him to do. Be smart about this, take to heart all these concerns, look at the documents, and then let's make sure that if gas drilling occurs in New York, it's done safely so that our environment and our public health are not put in jeopardy. I believe that dealing with the natural gas drilling wastewater could be the Achilles heel of Marcellus shale gas. It is a giant proven reserve of gas, but if we can't get the gas out of the ground without causing immense pollution problems, then we really have to go back and develop a plan B. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to speaking with you again.